Imagine a woman in her 30s. She's intelligent, educated, she's held jobs, raised a family, maintained relationships, but something has always been off. She can't finish projects. She starts a dozen things and completes none. She loses track of conversations. She forgets appointments. She gets frustrated and snappy with kids. She feels like she's constantly running behind, like everyone else got a manual for life that she never received. She goes online, she watches a video about ADHD, and for the first time in her life, every single symptom matches. She feels seen. She goes to her doctor. The doctor gives her a screening questionnaire. It takes about 5 minutes. She scores high.
Here is the prescription.
The doctor writes a prescription, stimulant, medication. Within a week, she feels sharper, more focused. She thinks finally. But here's what nobody asked. She hasn't slept more than 5 hours a night in 3 years. She's been in a low-grade state of anxiety since her 20s. She's had a difficult childhood she's never fully processed, and she's been drinking 3 cups of coffee a day just to function. She does not have ADHD. She has chronic anxiety, sleep deprivation, and unprocessed trauma. 3 conditions that together produce a symptom profile virtually identical to adult ADHD. And the stimulant she was prescribed? It's increasing dopamine and norepinephrine. That woman is not hypothetical. She's a composite of dozens of adults I have worked with over 17 years of clinical experience. Today I want to walk you through something that could fundamentally change the way you understand your own diagnosis or the diagnosis of someone you love. This is not anti-psychiatry and this is not anti-medication. This is a clinical psychologist telling you what the latest research confirms and what your doctor may not have had time to explain. I'm Dr. Slobodan Nešović, a licensed clinical psychologist and a founder of Psycho-Enalysis, and someone who has spent 17 years working with adults whose suffering was made worse, not better, by an inaccurate diagnosis. Here's why this matters right now. An estimated 6% of American adults, roughly 15 million people, have been diagnosed with ADHD. 1 in 4 adults now suspect they may have undiagnosed ADHD, driven largely by social media content. And adult stimulant prescriptions have more than doubled since the start of the pandemic. But here's what the research tells us, and what most people never hear. Nearly 90% of adults who screen positive on standard ADHD questionnaires do not actually have ADHD. 90% false positives on the very tests being used to make the diagnosis. So what do those people actually have? Well, that's what this video is about. In adulthood, the diagnostic picture is more complicated than in childhood, and for a specific reason. Adults have decades of accumulated life experience, illnesses, injuries, traumas, anxieties, sleep problems, hormonal changes, any of which can produce ADHD-like symptoms. As one leading researcher put it, concentration difficulties are the second most common symptom listed for conditions across the entire DSM-5. Number 1, and this is the most common misidentification I see in adults, anxiety. Here is what anxiety looks like when you're not looking for it. You can't concentrate, not because your mind wanders randomly, but because it's locked on worry. You can't finish tasks, not because you lost interest, but because you're paralyzed by perfectionism or fear of getting it wrong. You're restless, not from excess energy, but from physical tension and hyperarousal. You forget things, not from a working memory deficit, but because your brain is using all its bandwidth to monitor for threats. On a standard ADHD screening questionnaire, that scores as ADHD every time. Here is a clinical key. ADHD inattention is pervasive and context independent. It shows up everywhere, at work, at home, during activities you genuinely enjoy. It doesn't depend on the emotional environment. Anxiety-driven inattention is context-dependent. It gets worse when stress increases. It improves, sometimes dramatically, when the person feels safe, is on a vacation, or in a low-pressure environment. A critical question any clinician should ask: when in your adult life have you been able to focus well, and what was different about those times? If the answer involves feeling safe, being relaxed, or having less stress, the attention problem may not be ADHD. A 2024 study specifically examined whether the standard adult ADHD self-report scale can even distinguish ADHD from anxiety in adults with clinical anxiety disorders. Their finding: the overlap is so significant that the tool alone cannot make the distinction reliably. Number 2, and this one I feel strongly about: trauma. Adults carry their histories in their nervous systems. A person who experienced childhood abuse, neglect, domestic violence, or any form of chronic threat grows up with a nervous system calibrated for survival. That adult will often present like this: hyper-vigilant, difficulty concentrating, impulsive decisions, emotional reactivity that feels disproportionate, restlessness, difficulty sleeping, difficulty maintaining relationships. That description fits adult ADHD almost perfectly. But it also describes a nervous system that learned decades ago that the world is not safe. A 2022 study of 250 adults diagnosed with ADHD found that 44% had experienced significant childhood trauma. Among those with PTSD, 85% had childhood trauma histories. The clinical key: ADHD is developmental. It has been present since childhood across all environments. There was never a before when everything was fine. Trauma-driven symptoms have a before and after. There was a period when the person functioned differently. Something happened, and capacity for focus, calm, and emotional regulation shifted. And here is the treatment implication that matters most. If you give a traumatized adult a stimulant designed for ADHD, you're increasing dopamine and norepinephrine in a nervous system that already is running hot. You may be amplifying the very dysregulation you're trying to treat. The treatment for unprocessed trauma is not a stimulant. It is trauma processing. It is nervous system regulation. It is tools like EFT that work directly with the body's stress response. Number 3, sleep. A 2024 clinical overview found that sleep disorders are the most common comorbid condition in adult ADHD. Insomnia was found in over 44% of adults with ADHD, but here is the diagnostic problem. Sleep deprivation itself, from any cause, produces symptoms indistinguishable from ADHD. An adult with untreated sleep apnea will present with extreme daytime fatigue, brain fog, inability to concentrate, irritability, and restlessness. On paper, that is ADHD. In reality, it is a person who has not slept properly in months or years. And here's a pathway almost nobody screens for: iron deficiency. Iron is essential for the production of dopamine, the very neurotransmitter that ADHD medications are designed to regulate. When an adult is iron deficient, their dopamine system underperforms. The symptoms: inattention, restlessness, difficulty focusing, identical to ADHD but potentially treatable with supplementation alone. The clinical key: before any adult ADHD diagnosis is assigned, a basic blood panel, iron levels and thyroid function should be standard. It takes one blood draw and it can change the entire diagnostic picture. Number 4, thyroid disorders. An underactive thyroid produces brain fog, fatigue, poor concentration, and slowed processing. That mimics inattentive ADHD. An overactive thyroid produces hyperactivity, restlessness, sleep disturbance, emotional instability, and difficulty concentrating. That mimics combined type ADHD. A case published in 2024 described a patient whose worsening ADHD was actually undiagnosed Graves' disease. A simple TSH blood test, which had never been ordered, identified it immediately. In my professional opinion, thyroid function should be addressed before any adult ADHD diagnosis is finalized. Number 5, mood disorders. The inattentive type of ADHD is most commonly first diagnosed in adulthood, and it is frequently confused with depression because it looks like depression. Low motivation, withdrawal, inability to start or finish things. Many adults, particularly women, spend years being treated for depression or anxiety before anyone considers ADHD. A 2023 systematic review called Misdiagnosis found that women with ADHD commonly receive multiple prior diagnoses before ADHD is identified, sometimes after a decade or more in the system. But the reverse happens equally. Depression is misdiagnosed as ADHD because the person can't concentrate, can't finish things, and has lost interest. Bipolar disorder adds another layer. During manic phases, a person is impulsive, distractible, and restless. Across a year, that cycling pattern can look like ADHD with mood swings. The clinical key: ADHD is persistent and stable. It does not cycle. If the symptoms come in episodes, weeks of high energy followed by weeks of collapse, that is a mood pattern, not an attention pattern. Number 6, borderline personality features. In adults, BPD shares impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, unstable attention, and difficulty maintaining relationships with ADHD. The overlap is significant. The clinical key: BPD's core feature is fear of abandonment and identity instability. ADHD has neither. If the impulsivity is driven by relational fear, the treatment path is entirely different. Mislabeling BPD as ADHD means the person never receives the relational therapy that could actually help. And number 7, a newer clinical concept: cognitive disengagement syndrome, or CDS. This was previously called sluggish cognitive tempo. It describes an adult who is chronically dreamy, slow to process, mentally foggy, and frequently spaced out. It looks exactly like inattentive ADHD. But 2025 research suggests CDS has a different neurobiological profile and may respond differently to stimulant medication. The ADHD label has been absorbing conditions that don't belong under its umbrella, and the field is just now beginning to sort them out.